Okay, I think we did it. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our second mobility debate of the season, this time in Council District 2. We're very excited to have Jillian, John Paul, Manny, and Sam with us, the four of the candidates for Council District 2. We're going to give a little bit of context and history, including specific to Council District 2. Then we're going to go to candidate opening statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to give an opening statement. We're going to go through a list of 6 curated questions from our steering committee, and each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer. And then we're going to open it up to audience Q&A. If you want to ask a question, please go to that link up top, and you can also vote on other people's questions, and we will ask the most popular questions. At the end, each candidate will get 2 minutes for a closing statement. So I am Michael Schneider. I'm the founder of Streets for All. Thank you for coming tonight. And I'm going to start with some context and history. These are some general stats related to LA, and then we'll talk specifically about Council District 2. The way we live with so many cars is really expensive, actually. And it's estimated that our local economy loses $19 billion per year from people just being gridlocked and stuck in traffic. Traffic is really stressful. There was one study that showed that domestic violence actually increased on the worst traffic days. So it's really bad for our health, and it's also incredibly stressful and leads to horrible outcomes. It pollutes our air. Our air is one of the dirtiest of any major city in the country. And just by living in LA, you breathe the equivalent of up to 4 cigarettes per day. We also rank worst in the nation for year-round ozone emissions and 5th worst for particle pollution. Lastly, and not unrelatedly, we have one of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. So we are literally poisoning ourselves the way we choose to get around. It's also a very dangerous city. A pedestrian is killed about once every 3 days in the city of Los Angeles. Very dangerous. If you're disabled and use a wheelchair, you have a 36% higher likelihood of being killed in a crash. And our pedestrian fatality rate is nearly 4 times the national average. So it is actually safer to be a pedestrian in New York City, which has many more people in it, than it is in Los Angeles. It also penalizes people that are not in cars. So the average bus is now less than 11 miles per hour, about the same as someone on a scooter or on a bicycle. And the most amazing stat is 2/3 of all trips made inside the city of LA are less than 5 miles. Half are 3 miles or less. So just for the record, Streets for All is not trying to replace cars. There's a car in our logo. We recognize they have a place, but we think there's a huge opportunity to replace cars for the shorter trips around home, running errands, dropping kids off at school, things like that, if we just had safer infrastructure. So when you take this all together, we really do have a lot of work to do as a city. Part of the city or part of the city government's initiative to fix this started all the way back in 1977. In 1977, a bike plan was created of 673 miles of bikeways across Los Angeles. Only 5 miles were implemented in close to 20 years. In 1996, a new bike plan was created with 1,680 miles. Only 104 of those miles were installed. In 2010, essentially the same plan from 96 that was not fully implemented was dusted off, and another 100 miles was implemented. And then in 2015, what we're currently operating under, the Mobility Plan 2035, called for 500 miles of bike lanes in addition to bus lanes, pedestrian safety improvements, et cetera. And so far, 37 miles have been implemented. So our city's really good at plans. We're not so great at the implementation part. Specific to bike lanes, it's a very broken process. First of all, the pavement has to be in perfect condition. If the pavement condition index is less than 85, they will not install a bike lane. So the best opportunity to put in a bike lane is during repaving. A council office has to be interested. This is a quirk of Los Angeles. It's not the mayor and it's not just the Department of Transportation, but it's specific to each council office. Then the council office sets the bar and tells LADOT, we want 2 months, 3 weeks, 6 months, 2 years of outreach, whatever it is. And LADOT goes and does that. And then if the council office is happy with those results and signs off, then a project is implemented. It's a very slow process that right now is block by block and mile by mile and council district by council district, and it's pretty broken. This is citywide. You can see 256 miles under the mobility plan is planned, and 208 miles of bus lanes are planned. Only 24 protected bike lane miles have been built and 32 bus lane miles. So again, not very much. Specific to CD2, since 2015, out of about 30 miles of bike lanes, only 6% have been implemented since 2015. And only 5% of protected bike lanes, less than 1 mile, have been put in CD2. As far as crashes and injuries and deaths, 127 people have been killed due to traffic violence since 2015. 70 pedestrians have been killed, 5 cyclists have been killed in the district, and over 17,000 people have been injured by cars. Either they were in another car, or they were on foot, or they were on a bike or a scooter, and they were injured since 2015 in the district. And this screenshot up top is from a recent motion at City Council. We are on track to have one of the deadliest years ever for pedestrians in the city of Los Angeles. As of mid-October, 134 people walking have been killed by people driving, and 427 people have been injured. And it's a 13% rise in the number of people killed and 18% rise in severe injuries since this time last year. So it's pretty grim out there. Part of the reason why we launched Healthy Streets LA, this is our ballot initiative. This will be on the March 5th, 2024 ballot. And it would create a new ordinance that would mandate the city of Los Angeles implement its own mobility plan anytime they repave a street. So we think this isn't the end all be all, but it is a huge step in the right direction to make the streets safer and more multimodal. With that, we are going to go into candid opening statements. So the order is at the bottom. Whoever's outlined is first. So Jillian, you are going to be first. And whenever you're ready, I will start the timer.
Oh, okay. All right. So hi, everybody. I'm Jillian Burgos, and I'm on the NoHo Neighborhood Council, and I'm a lifelong renter running for Los Angeles City Council District 2. So my mobility story is that I actually did not get my license until the age of 23, and I relied on public transportation. I grew up in Ohio, and I depended on walking, bike riding, using public transportation, and carpooling for all of my mobility needs. So I was deeply afraid of driving and being on the road with other drivers. So when I moved to Los Angeles in 2009, it was extremely disappointing that the second largest city in the US did not prioritize public transit and had such wide roads and freeways. So I've tried to commute to work via bike, and I was terrified at the lack of protective infrastructure for cyclists. And I witnessed cars, trucks, company vans blocking the bike lanes and recklessly swerving, or even worse, using them as lanes to avoid traffic. And a few years ago, a friend of mine had a severe crash in where a driver opened their door while she was riding her bike, and it launched her into the air, and she injured herself and broke her arm. So this crash was completely avoidable if the city had implemented true protected bike lanes. We need to create a real urgency to move away from our car-centric culture of Los Angeles. And the best way to achieve this is to gravitate towards creating a network of 15-minute cities where people can eat, work, and play and live in their respective neighborhoods. And we can achieve this by changing zoning laws. But the 15-city-minute model will also reduce our reliance on cars and promote more walkable, livable cities. All of this is possible when we continue to elect leaders who do not take donations from special interests and are invested in bringing transit equity to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Up next, John Paul.
Well, hello. My name is John Paul Bird. I am a marriage and family therapist, a third-generation Angelino, and a candidate for Los Angeles City Council in District 2. You know what? I'm running to be the council person in this area because time and again I've seen that this area of the city has been really overlooked. If it's matters of the unhoused population, if it's matters of the mobility plan, right? If you look at what's planned for, Mobility 2035, there is a stark contrast in terms of the planning that occurred on the other side of the hill versus what's happened in the valley. And growing up, hey, I grew up riding the RTD for those of you out there that are old enough to remember that. And that's where I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, with my great aunt. And as I got older, there was the red line. I took the red line to work. That was fantastic. And now we have the situation where a lot of the infrastructure that we have built is going underused. So we have to get to the point that people are actually using the utilities and the resources that we have, right, making things feel safe again and inviting, so that we can have these self-governing systems. The more people that ride them, the better that things get. And to that end, I used to love riding my bike. And similar to Jillian's story, riding your bike to work can be a really scary situation. And that's the thing that we need to end, right? And overall, in this city, I feel that there's so many systemic and structural issues that lead to homelessness and poverty, one of which is transportation, right? Good quality, clean transportation, accessibility, that is part of the very backbone of what makes the city run. And for that reason, we need to elect people that are going to get things done.
Thank you. Next up, Manny.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Manny Gomez. I am running for Council District 2 because on every metric, if you're a stakeholder in the city of Los Angeles, city's broken, including this issue. And I take this personally as a jogger, a third generation Angelina as well, someone who's raising a young family where we don't feel safe in our own community. There's been pedestrian deaths in our neighborhood. Oxnard Elementary, our current council president, refused to do the work that was needed. Instead, put band-aids, slowing traffic down, artificial things that calm traffic, but doesn't stop the root cause of children getting run over by schools, right? And so with that being said, I am running because I also am a housing advocate. I'm an environmentalist, and this dovetails nicely into my vision of what the city can be, being very pedestrian friendly, being cyclist friendly, making sure we have the protections we need just to have a very green transit-oriented development, CD2, right? And city, really, it's not just about CD2, it's the whole city and the disconnect. So I think a lot of what Measure S does, and I'll just say it, I am fully supportive and endorse Measure S, Healthy Streets LA's ballot initiative. I think it's unconscionable that a mobility plan almost a decade late in delivering is at 3% implemented, but that's the story of Los Angeles, right? Things don't get implemented. We're good at vision. Sometimes we're good at passing things. Implementation is horrible. So I stand lockstep with Healthy Streets LA and all the advocates that refuse to accept the status quo. And I'm here to say that I am not the status quo. I am the change candidate, and I intend to do the things that, the mobility plan was intended to do and more. So thank you very much, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Manny. Sam.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me thank Streets for All for taking on this pivotal work to improve mobility in Los Angeles and improve the lives of Angelinos. One of the reasons I'm running for LA City Council is to improve the quality of life for millions who call Los Angeles home. I believe that an aggressive, comprehensive, and long-term planning to redesign our infrastructure with the environment in mind, it can make the streets safer, mobility more efficient and comfortable, and transform Los Angeles for future generations. We must put the lives and living standards of all Angelinos before profit, corporations, special interests, and therefore Streets for All Vision Zero plan with one of the most desirable climates. And there is no reason why we can't make it safer or more convenient for those who choose to bike around LA. There are countless benefits if we can transform our streets. We need to get behind Measure S and implement the city's mobility plan 2035 with countless organizations behind it. And this should be a no-brainer for LA. We must also reevaluate laws and regulations that are tougher to tackle, such as parking minimums, our metro system, and overall transit challenges. But we must not succumb to politics as usual. Bureaucracy and endless debates. As a lifelong public servant, labor and community organizer, I'm in a unique position to face some of the challenges head on and see them thoroughly and efficiently. And just recently, I took my 4-year-old and my 15-year-old on a bus tour, as well as metro tour, just to show them how Los Angeles is interconnected. But it's very interesting, the questions I got from my kids. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the support for what you guys are calling Measure S. I do want to say there was an error in the communication we sent out. We don't know our letters yet. There was actually an error from the existing occupant of CD2 that will be finalized this Friday. But we really appreciate it. For tonight, we could just call it Healthy Streets LA. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Katrina for our first question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina Kaiser, and I am on the steering committee for Streets for All. And our first question is about Vision Zero and the high injury network in Los Angeles. In 2015, former Mayor Garcetti launched Vision Zero. The goal was to eliminate traffic deaths by 2025, but 8 years in, we're further away from that goal. In 2022, 312 people died in LA due to traffic violence, and many more were injured. And this year, we're on track to have an even higher number of pedestrian deaths, as Michael mentioned. LA's high injury network represents the 6% of streets that account for 70% of traffic injuries and deaths. In CD2, this is nearly every major arterial: Vineland, Magnolia, Burbank, Cahuenga, Lankershim, Oxnard, Victory, Laurel Canyon, Whitsett, and Sherman Way are all on the high injury network. Since CD2 has some of the most dangerous streets in the entire city, if elected, what would you do to reverse this? Please be as concrete as possible. And we'll start with John Paul.
All righty, thank you for the question. And, I also have to say that I'm really disgusted by the fact that we haven't done anything to address what is called the high injury network. I mean, it's antithetical to good public service. But here's what I'm dedicated to doing, right? So I think that we really have to look at strategies that are around, safer systems, right? Because we know that people are fallible, people are going to make mistakes. So what we have to do is to make sure that the mistakes that people make don't lead to severe injuries and fatalities. To that end, I think what we need is, we need to do things such as speed humps. We need raised crosswalks. We also need to look at road diets in certain areas to really actively get ahead of lowering the speeds, because what we do know is that kinetic energy has a direct correlation to death and injury when it comes to these types of incidents. So we have to slow down our streets substantially. The other piece of that, right, goes into pieces of that mobility plan. The more we have protected bike lanes, currently there's only 2 in the mobility plan, which is ridiculous, but the more that we have those, the safer it's going to be. So if we pair bike lanes that are protected with raised crosswalks and geometric designs, things along those lines, we're going to get ourselves to a place that we're seeing fewer and fewer traffic deaths and fewer times that we have to answer, why did this happen to my family?
Thanks so much. Next is Manny.
Yes, part of what I would do is, yes, protected bike lanes, making sure that those areas that are most problematic have some other traffic calming measures, and if need be, 4-way stops, roundabouts. We need to do everything, right, to be able to mitigate this. So right now we're doing very little, if nothing. And the other idea I have is just going back to affordable housing, right? We have affordable housing crisis. We know the more that we build along the main arteries, Lankershim, Laurel Canyon, others, this will help to make more friendly green, hopefully, right? Lots of greening, shade trees. Part of what I want to do is plant 1,000 trees in the first 100 days, because one, it's symbolic and it's great for clean air, clean water, but also to show the city that with the right vision to plant lots of trees and bring down the urban heat islands, particularly in the valley, we can do it. We just have to be thoughtful, right? And I think with that, having transit corridors where people can have walkability, be able to cycle, and then have more access to the bus the 24-hour bus access to the red line, access to multimodal, hopefully connectivities. I think we should also have docking stations where we just don't have bikes that are, hopefully all electric, but scooters all electric, and docking stations where folks could actually be able to do that. And to do that, we could rely on philanthropy to maybe advertise there so it's not cost burden, and then hopefully get more people out their vehicles, have more affordable housing and greener communities.
Thank you. Next is Sam.
One of the main things that we have is it's a lot of talk, and we've been planning, but I think initially, for our vision to work here is that we need to set the actual design, because we talk about specific areas in the district or just given in LA. I mean, the roads have been designed really, I think they're out of date. Some of the infrastructure is crumbling. The population has increased, and yet, neither the city nor the LA DOT has taken any really, efficient and empirical study of how these events occur. And number one thing I would do is just redesign the roads, pass ordinances to reduce speeds on given thoroughfares and highways that we call, which are really streets, and roundabouts, and increase also study lanes where we can further study into these events where they take place. If there's X amount of injuries and they're reported, on the injury network, the Los Angeles, DOT has to really immediately get to work and find out how we can work with the council office to reduce these fatalities, as well as redesign the roads, because it's not going to get, it's not going to, the problem will never go away. It's going to only increase because of population increase. And we need to, really start thinking about how we're going to move Los Angeles in near future. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Jillian.
So it's obvious with 2 years left on our deadline for Vision Zero that it really needs to be taken seriously. And our current officials have not shown that interest in making it a reality. So Vision Zero's purpose was to focus on pedestrians and cyclists through engineering, enforcement, education, and it boasts a commitment to equity and engagement. But we haven't seen any of these commitments even marginally fulfilled. So many streets that, as we know, and as we've all said, in CD2 are dangerous. And we jokingly and lovingly call one of the 6-way intersections the mouth of the valley. That intersection is where several streets cross. It's where we have Vineland, Camarillo, Tujunga, and Lankershim. And if you're a pedestrian, it is so scary to go across those. The only way we're going to get past this is if we reduce our reliance on cars. And a way to do that is housing and 15-minute city model. We need to also reduce the speed of drivers and extend times for pedestrians in the crosswalks. A lot of that goes into equity, not having enough time to cross for elderly people or people with children, have stop signs on all 4 sides of some streets, and also make it easier to implement slow streets and calming measures like speed bumps. And frankly, maybe something a little bit bolder like stopping right on red. So I don't know why it takes so long for some of these things to be implemented. They are very much common sense and will save lives.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Taranig from our steering committee.
Riding a bike or scooter is dangerous in CD2. Around the district, people who depend on bikes or scooters to get around navigate a patchwork of mostly unprotected bike lanes that are in the door zone of protected cars or around delivery drivers idling at curbs. In CD2, the mobility plan includes protected bike lanes on Lankershim, Vineland, Van Nuys, and Sherman Way. To date, only Vineland and Sherman Way have bike lanes, and they're not protected. In other words, there is absolutely no physical protection between fast-moving cars and people on bikes. Imagine if sidewalks weren't elevated. So if elected, will you implement protected bike lanes on Lankershim, Vineland, and Sherman Way, even if car lanes or parking spaces have to be taken out to make room? How will you deal with pushback from those that don't want to give up car space and could never see themselves on a bike? Let's start with Manny.
Absolutely. I live off of Vineland, and I think it's imperative that we do that, right? It's good. I mentioned I'm a jogger. Lots of my neighbors are, and to be quite honest, folks don't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable. I jog on Chandler path, and I would like to see more connectivity to there, more arteries where we could actually do that. And on the pushback, I think it's pretty simple. It's public education, right? It's recognizing that we got to educate the community members, educate our neighbors, and more importantly, the policymakers, right? The folks that actually are pressed with doing the good work for the city, right? The 20% shortages that we have is an issue for staffing, but I have lots of experience working with these folks, whether it's HACLA, the Housing Authority, City of Los Angeles, LA Sanitation, planning, Bureau of Street Services. I've worked with them in the past. I work with them now in my current role with Tree People. And we know that, yes, staffing is an issue, but also the resources, the public education, the community engagement has to be authentic and has to be from the community. So I think that's something organically we could do to maybe take some of the burden off and be able to educate folks as to why it's needed, right? Whether you're a senior, whether you're someone experiencing disability, someone experiencing homelessness, I think it's important. It serves all of us. And it is part of public safety. It's part of the charge of the city. It's part of the charge of a city council member to do that. And I think I would work, very hard, tooth and nail to hold that, right? And that's one of the areas that I would prioritize for many reasons, but at the end of the day, it's just public safety. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Manny. Sam, your turn.
Yes, I will definitely support that. I do drive a car, but I also walk, we bike, with kids and family. And often, yes, it is absolutely dangerous to go on the street. That's why, I don't take my kids on the streets, but specifically on Lancashire and on Vineland, because it's narrow, especially on Vineland, we can definitely remove some car space. There is plenty of parking we have for future under the power plant land that we have that belongs to LADWP. We can move some community parking there along the edges, in addition to add protected bike lanes. And in addition, on Sherman Way, which my parents lived for a long time, going from 170 all the way on to west on Sherman Way, it's horrible, especially in the rush hour, or it's horrible. Just if it's dark, you're going to get hit by a car if you're not careful. Everyone is speeding on that road. I would definitely pass specific ordinances to protect the bike lanes, make it protective. In addition to that, many years ago when we brought, I've actively worked on events that evolved into be ciclovia, the roads that became sharrows. I would absolutely advocate and try to pass all of the protection that we can get for those protected bike lanes, because it's essential. 10, 15 years ago, no one believed in biking around city. It's coming to life, and I think it's doable. And the next council person, we can accomplish this.
Thank you so much, Sam. Jillian, your turn.
So I live off of Vineland, and I have firsthand experience with the lane being blocked, the bike lane being blocked, or watching cars zoom in front of me or get too close behind me. And I've actually heard stories from constituents on the NoHo Neighborhood Council, one in particular who has been hit a couple times. There is a U-Haul truck station on Vineland, and they quite often block that bike lane. So what good is a bike lane if it's blocked? And I think that we have the opportunity for amazing bike lanes. We have one of the best protected bike lanes in CD2 in the Chandler Bike Path. And the Chandler Bike Path spans, 2.8 miles, and it integrates the arts and murals, and it even has an outdoor community gym. It's so great that avid cyclists actually travel to our location just to enjoy it. And we need to prioritize the implementation of true protected bike lanes whenever we have repaving of streets and expand the network, especially near transit hubs and highly densely populated areas. So the mobility plan, actually going back to that, includes bike lanes on Lancashire. So we must be mindful if we want the bike lane infrastructure, bus lanes, and above all, DOT isn't fully staffed, and this is slowing down the planning and design work. And we need to fix staffing capacity at DOT, and we can pay for it by reallocating funds from services like LAPD, and who currently have over a third of our budget. And we need to invest in preventative measures more than reactive measures. And bike lane infrastructure is definitely that.
Thank you so much, Jillian. And John Paul.
Well, you know what? Absolutely. I'm in favor of all these protected bike lanes. And I actually think that it's time to be bold. It's time to be extremely bold because, Los Angeles is the second largest city in the United States of America. So there's no reason why in the San Fernando Valley we can't mimic things similar to what they have in London, right? The cycle superhighway, which it's able to move tons of people. It's increased the amount of safety on the streets. It's been a complete boon in terms of climate. And also, in being bold, I think we have to go all the way because during the last Ciclavia that was in CD2, I was riding my bike around on Lancashire and I realized something, which is that Lancashire, the street, I don't think actually needs to continue to be there. I think that we could actually re-envision this city to turn Lancashire into a promenade that goes all the way from Camarillo down to Chandler, thereby, reducing, automobile traffic on that street, putting bike lanes down there. This would feed into local businesses. It would create a third space, and it would also create a ton of climate resiliency. To that end, we would then move over to Vineland, where the majority of the traffic would be pushed down that way. We're going to have protected bike lanes there. We're going to have raised crosswalks. We're going to have speed humps. And that's how we start to really make this a city to be proud of, that's metropolitan, that's pedestrian, is by being bold. And whoever is in the council seat needs to be bold.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your answers. Back to Michael.
Thank you, Ternig. So Healthy Streets LA is our ballot measure that would require the city of Los Angeles to implement its own Mobility Plan 2035 whenever it repaves streets. We spent much of last year gathering over 100,000 signatures to qualify this thing, and 3,287 CD2 residents were part of that 100,000. It will be on the ballot March 5th, 2024. At City Council last year, Nuria Martinez led the charge against Council adopting it outright, despite her acknowledgement that the city is moving far too slowly on the mobility plan and on Vision Zero. As our campaign ramps up early next year, we will be looking to have allies on City Council speak out in support of the measure and work to get the constituents to vote for it. The question is, what do you think of the concept of forcing the city to implement the mobility plan during repaving? And will you commit to publicly supporting the ballot measure? And will you personally vote for it? We're going to start with Sam.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I will support, Healthy Streets LA on ballot measure, not just, by supporting, by, publicizing, by extending my message to everyone, but writing letters or, participating in forums. But I think we have to also take into consideration why it's so important, especially that just since 2015, only in 7 years, there's been, 95, 3% of those, miles planned were implemented or constructed. So this is absolutely critical. We need to jump on it. We need to make sure that we plan Los Angeles, not what took place 100 years when it was designed by a car industry. We need to revitalize some of the other opportunities that we have in order to have healthy streets, healthy lives, reduce pollution, make sure that our city and our constituents are going in a healthy direction instead of having all these dangerous paths that we took because we heavily realized and let the automotive industry plan our future and our commute in on around Los Angeles. So therefore, I strongly support it. I will support it in public. I will support it once I get elected. I will work closely with, Healthy Streets LA, make sure that we find creative avenues, to move in forward and have future generations to be safe and sound.
Thank you, Sam. Jillian, you're next.
Yes, so I'm just going to start off by saying I would 100% support Healthy Streets LA, and I would definitely vote for it. So I think it's only logical to implement the mobility plan while we're repaving streets. I mean, we're already taking the time and effort and energy to repave streets. It's it's just a no-brainer to me. So I also think our system does need some change. So council members should not have discretion over some of these projects because in actuality, it kills a lot of good projects. An example of this was the Tier 1 bike lanes on Lancashire. So they've been halted multiple times and we desperately need them. So as a member of the NoHo Neighborhood Council, I also supported Healthy Streets, and we voted in support to write a letter of Healthy Streets. So I think anything that is going to promote not having a car-centric culture and promote healthy pedestrian and cyclist lifestyles instead is the way to go. And I'm an advocate for healthy streets. Thank you.
Thank you. John Paul.
Hey, I'm completely a proponent of the concept when it comes to implementing the mobility plan. That is forcing the implementation with repaving. The fact that only 3% of the plan has been done, it's a dereliction of duty. So at that point, it means there needs to be a forcing function. So that why not? I'm absolutely committed to supporting it publicly, voting for it myself, and doing absolutely everything within my power, and working closely with Streets for All when it comes to collaboration and letting me know where I can show up best. And when it comes to the actual implementation of this stuff, I say let's start finding reasons to repave things. And also when it comes to my own staff, in order to really bring home the importance of it and make sure that we're on it, what I'm committed to do is when there's a pedestrian in CD2 that is killed or injured, I am committed to visiting that person's family and talking to them about what has occurred, right? As I have been, knocking doors, gathering signatures, all that type of stuff, time and again, I have spoken to people who have told me about, losing a parent, losing a loved one, losing a family, with the question of why has nothing been done? Why does it take someone to die before there's a crosswalk? And if we need to force the city to implement things, then by all means.
Thank you. Manny.
Yes, I think the concept is absurd on its face that we would have to do this as a society, as advocates, as folks that would rather probably be doing the implementation and guiding that and advising on that versus having to work incredibly hard. And thank you for your work. Collecting the 200,000 plus signatures of CD2 residents is not an easy feat. All of us know here we're working hard to get on the ballot, but it's required. So yes, absolutely, I support it. And I think it's another just, clear symbol of how City Hall has failed us on every level, right? It shouldn't take somebody putting a ballot initiative to force them to do what's already an ordinance. And two, I have my hands full here, as you could see, campaigning for myself to try to be the next council member to advocate for this. But I will openly support. I will do my best to integrate it into the campaigning and messaging, outwardly expressing my support for it. And yes, absolutely, I would vote for it as well, because without this being implemented, we're going to have the same outcome, right? We're going to have the same fatalities. And as we know, it's getting worse with each year. And the other piece, as environmentalists, I know through my work that cutting concrete is one of the most expensive things we could do. So repaving, I would love to not repave things to the extent we can and put more nature-based solutions where we can to actually have greener corridors and shade trees to reduce the urban heat island effect, but actually, bring some more walkability and hopefully more business throughout these corridors. People could actually enjoy them.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Jenny.
So question 4 is about the Metro Board. Currently, CD2 holds a seat on the Metro Board as part of the Los Angeles contingent. Metro's actions obviously impact the entire LA region beyond Council District 2. If elected, do you plan on seeking a seat on the Metro Board? And if so, what would your priorities be for Metro? And we're going to start with Jillian.
Yeah, I would definitely want to have some impact on the Metro Board. So I would definitely seek out a seat for that, because I think our system has the potential to be so much more. We need to aspire for, a public transit system like cities like Berlin or Tokyo, where they have more, they go further out, they have more stops, or New York even. And I think we can also go to a fare free public transit. I think that we spend a lot of money implementing transit and for fare enforcement, and when instead we can provide ridership for free to the public. And when we provide ridership for free to the public, I think that's going to increase public safety, because we're going to have more numbers of people on the metro. And I think that we also won't be investing in the technology of having those fare stations collecting fare, the turnstiles, all of that architecture, that hostile architecture that we won't need anymore. Also, one thing I love and would love to see expanded is the Metro Ambassador program. And I think that, it's really nice that we have these people on there that are specialized in the metro and can help navigate people, give them direction on where to go, and make them feel safe all at the same time, but they're unarmed. And I think that that program actually needs to keep on going. And we've seen a decrease in crime on the metro, 53%, and we can keep on going even further with that, with the expansion. So that's my opinion on that.
Thank you. And now over to John Paul.
When elected, I absolutely do plan to seek a seat on the Metro Board. And while there, I would want to see an expansion of the Metro Ambassador program. I would also want to work on a system in which there was unarmed crisis response teams that were stationed, at different subway stations, things along those lines. When it comes to having a good, effective system, right? I think about cities like London, where there are people that are essentially metro ambassadors, and when you're there, if you're confused, if you don't know where to go, they're there to assist you on your travel around. And as we have the World Cup coming, as we have the Olympics coming, there's going to be a whole lot of need for these types of positions. Further, I think that we need to expand our metro system substantially so that it goes to more places and makes it an effective system for people. And by making it an effective system, making it a safe system and a clean system, more people will ride it. And if you go to anywhere that has a thriving metro system, you realize that it's a self-governing system, right? It's a utility that everyone uses, and since everyone uses it, it tends to be very well taken care of. Those would be my plans on a Metro Board.
Thank you. And we're going to move to Manny.
Yes, I would definitely seek a seat on the Metro Board, and proud to say I'm the only candidate supported by Metro rank and file employees and management, AFSCME, and telecommunication union. And I think part of that is my vision to support Metro. I personally chose to live where I'm raising my family now, less than half a mile from the red line. I believe in public transit. I believe in safe and reliable public transit. I've lived in different cities. I've traveled, as has been said here, to other countries, and what we do and how we treat our transit system is inexcusable, right? So I think for starters, we need to get federal investment into the city to make sure that as we build out Metro, as we make it more reliable, more safe, we actually have those federal dollars, right? So I think that's a starting point. And then two, working with the state wherever there is connectivity so we could draw down and not use so much of city taxpayer dollars would be great. And in terms of how Metro oversees its safety, I think those should be union jobs. Those shouldn't be non-union jobs. We need working family jobs in North Hollywood, in CD2, in the city of Los Angeles. So I would love to see any revisions, any upgrades to safety measures, unarmed safety measures. I think there should be unions, right? And I think the unions who are in Metro now should have a say there and a strong voice, and that would be my voice. And also, I think we need to protect the fare box. I think the fact that we don't do that, we're losing revenue and losing opportunities to improve the system. So those are some of the things I would do.
Thanks, Manny. And over to you, Sam.
I will certainly seek on Metro Board. I will seek a seat in Metro Board because I think back in '94 when I was growing up, I remember when they were digging Metro at Western and Wilshire, and there were so many promises made going back in time when it was just becoming, they were just digging and building the Metro. But I think we lost the touch because of various issues, the lack of promotion, lack of engagement with the public and the trust of public of using the Metro. But I think I will definitely contribute my advocacy for public transportation on the board, continue pushing public education and making sure that from very young age, we get riders, we recruit them, we make sure that they choose the Metro over a car, and the cost of the car and the dangerous dangerous pollution of the car, and hopefully invest in metro system and expand the grid, make sure that we reach from one end of the city to the other end without any hassle, and make sure that metro is the future of Los Angeles. Because no matter how we look at it, the reason people don't take the metro and they don't rely on it because it's dangerous. There's always crimes. I mean, the metro station in North Hollywood has been a stabbing central, and we want to make sure that we protect it. And while on the board, I will definitely make sure that we find every dollar out there to provide security, ambassadorship, and make sure that we encourage and invite more riders and build the entire metro system that reaches across the city. Thank you.
Thank you. And now back to, did we get everyone? Yes. Okay, now back to Katrina.
Thanks so much. Our next question is about the Van Nuys bike lane plan specifically. Van Nuys Boulevard has a protected bike lane on the mobility plan from Valley Vista Boulevard to Foothill Boulevard. Some of it has been built already in the North Valley, but most of it remains missing, making Van Nuys very dangerous to bike on. In the past, CD2 and CD6 gave Metro a green light to remove the bike lane when implementing light rail on Van Nuys. But our vision is that bike lanes and trains go together, and that we shouldn't have to give up a previously approved bike lane to get light rail at all. The street is up to 85 feet wide, which is plenty of room for both the train and bike lanes if we're willing to trade in a car lane. As council member, will you make it a priority to restore the planned bike lane on Van Nuys Boulevard, working with CD6 and Metro to get it not only put back in the plans, but also implemented alongside the train? And will you have the courage to do this, even if it takes space away from cars? We'll start with John Paul on this.
Yes. Yeah, very, very plainly, yes. That is something that I will advocate for. And also, it's interesting, the whole dynamic, because when we're talking about it in terms of taking space away from cars, right, this is something that actually does feed back into the whole notion of Vision Zero, right? That if you have less space for cars, then cars will not be able to go as fast and create as much kinetic energy, which causes injuries. So it actually makes a whole lot of sense to take this street that is 85 feet wide, putting light rail on there, putting a protected bike lane on it, and limiting the amount of automobile traffic as a measure to protect pedestrians that are crossing the street and things along those lines. Yeah, that's I'm going to keep it short and sweet. That's all I got on that one. An emphatic yes.
Cool, thank you. Next is Manny.
Absolutely. I would be honored and privileged to work with Councilmember Imelda Padilla on this. I think this is an area of, it just makes a lot of common sense. It makes sense for the environment. It makes sense for hopefully tracking business on that corridor. I used to live not too far from there. And while there are room for improvement and there is room for more business vibrancy there, I think this will help that and not the opposite, right? I don't think we need more cars to attract business. I fairly think the opposite. And we saw during the pandemic, right? That you have more walkable cities, you have folks coming in for different reasons or just active, passive recreation. It does hopefully bring more folks to be able to use this. Sorry, I'm getting distracted with the comments in the chat. But with that being said, yes, I would, recognizing that sometimes what happens in the neighboring district affects other communities. I'm a firm believer of why we need strategic vision across the city and not 15 different plans with 15 different outcomes. And this is a good example of how that could be treated as such and dovetails nicely into my vision for what I would like to see the city. But with that being said, I also think it's about just public education, or going back to educating the public and the community and getting real authentic stakeholder engagement to recognize what would be the issues with adding the bike lane back, right? And then incumbent on city council and staff to be able to sell the story and be able to make the pitch on why it's good for business and the community.
Thanks so much. Over to Sam.
Yes, I strongly support that, but we also have to take into consideration that, we have to build this for the public to have access in order to demand or even ask them about come and share, let's change your car for a scooter or for a bike or for public transit, because we don't have the actual capacity to demand some of the things from the people. But I think specifically on Van Nuys Boulevard, it's definitely a doable position because Van Nuys Boulevard is quite wide. In addition to that, at the last Van Nuys Neighborhood Council, I ran into in the new council woman Imelda Padilla. We actually spoke about this, and she was really looking forward to engaging in some future development right on Van Nuys Boulevard, because it's such a long connection, from one end to the other, from north to south. And I think, as the next council person, it's definitely a project that I would tackle, because Van Nuys Boulevard, as you see, has quite a capacity, even in the back scene, to navigate with cars, as well as that designated lane for the bikes, and also the protective lane that it can stretch from one end to other. But I think, we have to start from one point where we can provide these resources and the pathway for riders. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Jillian.
Hi. So I think that I would definitely push for a motion that if any bike lanes are removed, that they should be replaced. And I would definitely work towards restoring the Van Nuys Boulevard bike lane. I think it makes perfect sense to add a tier 1, or even if we can fit it in, because it is so wide, we could possibly fit in a tier 4 if the room is available. So I'm looking forward to partnering up with the other council members, with CD6 council member Imelda Padilla, and also looking forward to working with council member Rahman in CD4 to making sure that we have a network of bike paths, especially that go to transit hubs. I think that that's one of the ways we're going to get people away from a car-centric lifestyle. And so this actually coincides with the mobility plan vision I have about implementing the true bike lanes, especially on Lancashire, which is already part of the mobility plan, the high injury network. But most of all, we need to educate the community on the importance of this and incentivize methods of other modes of transit by giving subsidies for e-bikes or for not having a car to people, and encourage them to change their mode of transportation and change their thought process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Finally, back over to Michael.
Thank you. This is our last curated question. We'll open up to the audience. It's about parking. Los Angeles currently has parking minimums that dictate a minimum number of parking spaces depending on the land use, both commercial and residential developments. Despite our transit-oriented communities program and AB 2097, we continue to allow developers to build as much parking as they want, including near high-quality transit. The District NoHo project is a key project in CD2, and we are excited to see more than 1,000 housing units in the space and 87,000 square feet of publicly accessible open space. However, we are dismayed that right above a transit station, the city is allowing 3,313 parking spaces, which is more than 2 per housing unit. This encourages residents to drive instead of take the transit system we are spending billions of dollars on to build and expand. So the question is, as council member, Will you support eliminating parking minimums in the city of Los Angeles? And will you support parking maximums within a half mile of high quality transit? And we're going to start with Manny.
Absolutely. I think it's important. I think part of our disaster of urban planning we've done in the city of LA, so much so that I'm proud to say, well, maybe not so proud as Angelino, my 5-year-old on walks, on jogs, when we're out, points out very clearly good examples and bad examples of urban planning, and he gives rationale. So my 5-year-old understands it. And when we go to other communities and other neighborhoods, other cities, it's a travesty. So I think that's part of the original root cause of some of the issues. And I think we need to eliminate them. And of course, enforce maximums wherever there is high quality transit. And I think we should, a half mile, we could even probably expand it depending on what connectivities and multimodal options we have, like in other cities. And it's been said here, whether European or otherwise, I've seen those models. I've worked in those jurisdictions with the city of Chicago, for example, to do this. So I know what it takes. And it takes, yes, political will. It takes federal funding. It takes public-private partnerships, but really it takes the vision, right, to be able to get community behind something and make sure that their voice is heard. And that's kind of a trend you're hearing in my responses here. So if the community wants it and we know that they need it, I think we got to be able to integrate those elements, right, to be able to make the case why the parking isn't needed, but also you have to have the option, right? You can't just say we're taking away a parking space, but for a single parent, for somebody who has to travel 50 miles across town, the way I grew up with a single mother on a fixed income, you have to have those options. And I think it's imperative that we also provide those options.
Thank you. Sam?
I would absolutely eliminate, parking minimums. One of the biggest things, holding Los Angeles back from more affordable housing and less auto dependent, future. If you look, mathematically, it's 1.5 per resident in LA County are about 18 million parking spaces. And this is really cutting into a cost of development and so forth. One parking lot, one parking space in a structured building costs about 50,000 just to produce. And another one, and this is according to the latest, study, parking will be closer to 70,000 per space if it's underground. So if we eliminate these minimums and increase buildings, near transit and, access to public transit, the cost will be reduced. And obviously this would be passed down to the actual tenant or the next person who's going to own the property, who's going to purchase that specific, apartment unit. So it will definitely eliminate the burdensome cost when it comes to, parking minimums. So in this case, I strongly support that we remove parking minimums from planning, as well as strategically understand that parking is necessary, but often, people also take into consideration if there's no parking, they're going to take public transit, and we're going to, as a community, as a society, we will encourage them to take on public transit and use public transit. So this will definitely benefit, affordable housing as well and contribute to the future of urban planning in our city. Thanks.
Thank you. Jillian?
So I think the first thing that we need to do is just to change our mentality. So we are just so ingrained that car is the only way we can go. And the reality is we have a huge population and we can't shove parking in every available space. So I'm with Assemblymember Laura Friedman, who has supported getting rid of parking minimums. And to be honest, parking lots are just bad for the environment. They take away valuable land from housing. It reduces our green spaces, and they're not very attractive to look at. We need to reduce parking minimums, especially near transit hubs. So District NoHo would have been the perfect place to do that since we have that metro station right there. And I think that, parking minimums attached to housing is costly, and it raises the amount of rent, and it reduces the amount of housing being built overall. So by some estimates, our urban land is 5% of it's actually being taken up by parking. And I think that's too much. Again, we can help encourage other methods of transportation by, like, people who are living near transit hubs, making metro free for them, having an incentive there, subsidizing e-bikes, or, subsidizing a pedestrian type of lifestyle and taxing cars. Maybe the rent costs more for those people who have parking spots. but we need to definitely change our mentality and reduce parking minimums. Thank you.
Thank you. John Paul.
Yeah, I absolutely support the notion of eliminating parking minimums. It makes building affordable housing more expensive. It takes up, very valuable space that we could be utilizing for other things. And, also I think, the idea of parking maximums is also a really great way to look at solving some of these problems here. More than anything else, I think that we can look at the city of Los Angeles and say that the city of Los Angeles is having a little bit of an identity crisis, right? It's almost like a midlife crisis for a city that, it had been going about its life in a certain way, planning things around, cars and what have you, only to now enter this new phase, right? This new phase, which is more about density, and it's about, growing up rather than out. And as a result, we need to have corresponding changes that, help the city and all of us to come along into the new reality and the new future of what this city is. Gone are the days of old where, planning around cars is something that is acceptable, right? We know that from climate studies. We know that in terms of what's going on with our loneliness epidemic, right? The city of Los Angeles, we spend so much time in our cars alone. We've fallen out of community. The more that we're able to get back into community, the better we will be, the healthier we will be. And eliminating parking minimums is a big part of that.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the curated part. So we're going to get into some audience questions. We're going to be more analog for this one. So if you see me do this, that means you have 5 seconds left. It's up to 60 seconds. You don't have to take it all for each question. And let me just get things ready for who went first last time. I apologize. I think it was you, Manny, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So we're going to start with Sam on this one. The question is, what is your stance on Metro's proposed Sepulveda Transit Corridor project? I just had a little bit more color. I think what this person is asking, this does touch the edge of CD2. Monorail versus heavy rail. Do you have an opinion and anything else you'd like to say about the project? So we'll go ahead and start with you, Sam.
I mean, absolutely. I strongly support that project, and I would definitely go monorail on that because, that will cost us less, and it will create more rapid construction of the lane, as well as it's also provide fun when often you ride in Europe, in densely populated cities like Paris or London, or even Hamburg, Germany. Their metro system is underground, but at some point, you leave the tunnels and you go on rail, and you can see the beautiful nature around you. And I think that's the reason I would support it, because it will be cheaper to construct versus the method where we have to dig a tunnel. So, and it would be constructed faster if it's a monorail. So I would absolutely support it, and I would contribute as much as I can as a council person, make sure that we can have that as soon as possible, because we have the Olympics, we have the World Cup around the corner, and we're going to have a lot of visitors here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jillian?
So I definitely would support it. I'm a big advocate of heavy rail, and I think that it's a great way to reduce car travel and to incentivize people to actually use public transportation and connect different parts of our city. So, reducing car travel is something that we desperately need to do in our reliance on fossil fuels in order to reduce climate change and to help make our air more cleaner and breathable. And in the same time, we will reduce pedestrian and cyclist deaths with less people traveling by car. So I absolutely support that.
Thank you. Jean Paul?
I support it as well. You
support which?
I support the notion of the entire project. Currently, I am supporting a monorail. However, what I would want to do before formally committing to it is I would want to see a little bit more of a environmental impact report to better understand, just environmentally what it means between, a monorail versus the heavy rail option. But as of this very moment, I would go monorail.
Thank you. And Manny.
Yes, support the project and heavy rail. I think heavy rail has shown to be the way to go, and we know it's costlier, we know it's slower, but we just have to do it. And I think relying again on federal investment, being very thoughtful on how we engage and work with the federal delegation to actually bring that money and then do it in a quick way for, yes, all the things, World Cup, the Olympics, but I don't think we really need a reason. I think it's the thing we should do, and we should have done it 20 years ago, in my view, and I support it. Draw down emissions, get people in transit, and yes, make sure it's safe and reliable as soon as possible.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Jillian on this one. It's been said here a lot that current and past leaders have not been successful. My question is, what do you think were their challenges, and how would you approach it differently? And I'm going to assume the context is transportation here, since that's what we've been
okay, that's what I was wondering. Not successful in what? Because that's still very wide.
Well, I think we all acknowledge that past city leaders have not protected pedestrians perhaps as much as we'd like, or implemented the mobility plan, etc. So we've all said, okay, our past leaders haven't worked out. So the question is, what do you think were their challenges, and how would you approach it differently? Starting with you, Jillian.
Yeah. I think some past leaders were beholden to special interests and weren't necessarily actually interested in passing laws that protect pedestrians or cyclists. And myself, I'm definitely deeply invested, and I think building relationships with other council members, again, like I said, the surrounding council members, if we build a relationship with council member Rahman, who is a huge advocate of protected bike lanes and protecting pedestrians. If you go from CD2 and you see our white painted bike lanes, and then you travel into CD4, all of a sudden they have, they're colored in with green, and that helps to amplify their presence. I mean, it's not perfect, and still I would prefer a tier 1 or tier 4 protected bike lane, but it just shows the care that another council member has. So working together with them, I think, and not being afraid to make bold choices. Thank you.
Thank you. John Paul?
I think that the reason why we haven't seen more things change is that, there's a whole lot of socioeconomics that go into development and planning of things, right? So in the city of Los Angeles, to date, it typically is a situation that people who use, the public transit, they're pedestrians, they're riding bikes. A lot of times this is a function of not being able to afford a car, right? That is, for a long time been like the historical notion of what that is. And I think that's why we haven't actually seen things like that happen, right? Unfortunately, within, our current city politics, there's going to be more catering towards, towards the donor class, towards, high propensity voters, things along those lines. And, I think it's disgusting. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we need to expand the district so that we have more direct representation. But, what I'm dedicated to doing, as I said before, right, is, I'm dedicated to making sure that, these improvements are made. And when someone is injured, when someone is killed, putting myself in their view and explaining why.
Thank you. Manny?
Yeah, I think the failures are multi-pronged, but one, it's just lack of vision, lack of vision from the city, lack of vision. Apologize for the noise here. Lack of vision from the city, lack of leadership from the top, right? Mayors, council presidents, etc. But also what's been said, right? There are certain stakeholders, constituencies that have more voice. We see it in CD2, depending on where you're at. Your party doesn't kind of warrant the need, right? And in this view, where the example I gave, pedestrian safety, North Hollywood didn't deserve discretionary funds, right? Because a child's death was not valued in North Hollywood next to Oxnard Elementary, whereas I would take the opposite approach, right? Let's find the money, let's get the money, let's use discretionary dollars. But I think that's one example right now in real time where the city's failed us and lives are at loss, and that's not okay. And so I will stand up and have political will and be able to push back against those folks to do the right thing.
Thank you, Sam.
Can you give me the question again, please, Michael?
Yep. It's been said a lot that current and past leaders have not been successful. The question is, what do you think were their challenges and how would you approach it differently?
It comes to will, and it's I think, my opponents, some of them said it exactly. It takes a lot of will, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of interest. So if you go back and look who really participates in voting and asks questions, North Hollywood was the murder capital of the world when I was growing up, but it has changed due to increasing immigrants, home purchases by first generation of immigrants. Now, someone like me is teaching them how to write letters to their council office, to their mayor, and so forth. So once we educate the public, empower the public, and hold leaders or elected officials on any level, on city, state and county, we can definitely get work done. And if there's a saying, there's an old saying, right? If the baby doesn't cry, they don't nobody knows what's wrong with the baby. So in same way, it takes a lot of political will, about accomplishment, and bold leadership and unpopular leadership. So I think the next public person has to definitely step up and make sure that he or she can definitely fight and continue fighting for their fair share. Thank you.
Okay, we might be able to get through 2 questions. Definitely we'll get there at least one more. The question is, and we're going to start with John Paul. If elected, would you take an alternative form of transportation to City Hall, understanding that you might have lots of meetings throughout the city? If so, what modes and routes would you take? For example, bike from home to the Red Line and then walk to City Hall. We'll go ahead and start with John Paul.
Yes, and I will right here, right now, formally pledge that at least once a week I will take the Red Line or the B Line to City Hall. And in order to get there, I'm close enough actually that I probably would walk. I would probably walk there. So yeah, I don't need all 60 seconds for that. I'm committed to it. I pledge to it at least once a week.
Thank you. Manny?
Love the question. Yes, it's why I chose to raise my family where I am. So yes, my preferred method is to jog to the Red Line. It's less than half a mile and then take it. Done it before. I'd love to do it again. And in terms of pledge, I don't like to get ahead of myself in terms of schedule and itinerary, but yes, I will pledge to do it sporadically and throughout a tenure, depending on time permitting. But I think it's incumbent on council member and council and Metro to make sure it's safe and reliable. So that will be the onus, right? To make sure it is, so I could actually do it. But I'd love to.
Thank you. Sam?
Same, I've like I said, I was there when the metro was being built. When I was a kid, I had my first job. It was in middle school. I was riding, on a bus from my house to where I was working. It was a part of a city program back then. So I could only envision when the metro would pop up. Because as a kid, when I came here, I came here very young. When I immigrated here, I rode all the European metros in Paris, in Italy, in England. So, but we never had a metro here. I even rode it in New York. But the beauty is that, everything starts at home. I would organize, events with schools and community, let's get out there. I mean, over the weekend, just make sure that we encourage everyone, because again, once they feel their community leader or anyone that is encouraging and putting together a day at a metro, or let's go to the Dodger ball game, or let's go downtown to a Broadway festival, slowly we'll encourage and make sure that we can find a way. And I would be one of them in the front lines, riding with my family. So absolutely, I'm for it. And I would demonstrate that by at least riding, a couple of times a month to work and from work, depending what work takes you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to try to do one last question quickly.
I didn't get to answer that one.
Oh, Jillian, I'm so sorry. Go ahead. I'm in
It's
such a
okay.
rush
I
to
mean,
try to get to one last question in. I apologize.
sorry, I'll make it really quick. It's kind of a no-brainer. I would definitely do it because I hate sitting in traffic in a car, and that would drive me insane. So I think that I've already mapped out my route, and it's easy for me to walk to or to bike to the metro. And from there, it's at Civic Center, Grand Station. It's like a 16-minute walk. I have a little bit of a knee injury, but I'm definitely committed to doing it several times a week.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if we can do this last question, maybe 45 seconds each. It often feels like a lot of the proposals and ideas focus on the southern part of the district. What safety, infrastructure, and public transportation proposals would you build to create more mobility options north of Victory Boulevard and connect us to the southern part of the district with all the options there? And we'll start with Manny on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think I outlined it, but making sure that Vineland, Sherman Way, a lot of the arteries, the main thoroughways have protected bike lanes to the extent we can, and making sure we're greening communities and making it reliable and increasing affordable housing, right? Where there's a lot of blight in CD2, I think we could turn that into affordable housing and transit corridors. So connecting that is my vision, and that's what I would do. Thanks.
Thank you. Sam?
In order to connect, you have to understand it's so narrow on some of the streets. I think I would expand some of the street as much as I can, add bike lanes, protected bike lanes. And in order to connect those communities, you have to also understand the communities demographically. So, blue collar people really live up there by Sherman Way and Sherman Way and Vineland area. And then you have, on the southern part of the, tip of the district is you have more of executives, studio and entertainment folks. So in order to connect that, I think it's just you have to provide safety, and safety we started at increasing, the street, paving the street because it's really crumbling, and making sure that it's walkable on sidewalks. And in addition to that, we have bike lanes, and they should be protected because again, there's a lot of movement on that thoroughfare. Thank you.
Thank you. Jillian?
I definitely think that we need to have protected bike lanes. That's just a no-brainer, especially on Vineland. So, and expanding it on Vineland as well. Increased greenery, definitely, in lower income areas. Unfortunately, it's always less in disenfranchised areas. And we need to focus on them because they need it the most. And I think implementing healthy streets, going back to that, implementing healthy streets will definitely help with all of that.
Thank you. And John Paul.
Yeah, so in order to connect the northern portion of the district to the southern portion, I think that it would be really good to revisit this mobility plan and actually plan for more express bus lanes. CD2 is largely absent of express bus lanes, so I think that would probably be the best way to effectively move people from the north to the south when it comes to work and things like that. And of course, the protected bike lanes and all of those items there. I will give my time back.
Thank you. We did that very quickly. I appreciate it. We're going to move on to closing statements. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back up. And Sam, go ahead when you're ready. Sam, you might be on mute.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Hello?
Yes.
I think
we can hear
something
you.
Wrong. All right. Hopefully I'm just going to. So, we started off really good, and thank you for the opportunity. And, we're right now at a very critical time, I think, and we must understand that the plans that have been in place have really fallen apart. And I think the next council person should understand the very details and the demographics of the district in the District 2. In addition to that, make sure that, whatever we're doing it in timing manner, because as we understand, we have the 2024, World Cup, as well as we have, the 2028 Olympics. A lot of the central city traffic will be pushed toward the valley. And it's a bedroom community. And we have to understand we're going to face a lot of challenges. And we have to work diligently in order to protect the valley, as well as find other creative methods. And in partnership with a lot of other city departments in order to keep the valley safe, keep the residents safe, and make sure that, the next council person is doing his or her job. And I think, that's the very important part of our candidacy, that we're promising that we keep things safe here in Council District 2, and also make sure that we're working in partnership with our neighboring council, council people, elected officials who also will work in coalition in order to keep things in a place where it's safe and the quality of life is protected for all stakeholders and constituents. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Jillian.
So thank you so much for having me. And I am excited as your next council member to prioritize Vision Zero and fight for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists, make our streets more accessible, livable, and enjoyable. So part of this is through advocating for the implementation of Vision Zero. And as a neighborhood council member, I have fought for things like that have helped stop street widening on Burbank Boulevard and supported Healthy Streets LA, and used my social media platforms to bring awareness to the traffic violence and point out solutions that we can come together with and invest in our communities in preventative measures instead of reactive measures. So a 15-minute city model will not only help to reduce traffic, it'll reduce reliance on fossil fuels and build a sense of community, which I think that we've been lacking for a long time. Everything should be within walking distance or accessible by a short bike ride or bus ride. And we can reach this goal by changing our zoning laws to allow mixed-use construction, expanding our public transportation system, and making it fare-free. We need to move away from our dependency of fossil fuels by encouraging our constituents to use clean methods of transportation, like cycling and walking. And we can accomplish this by making our streets more cyclist-friendly with true protected bike lanes, and make our sidewalks easier to navigate and more ADA compliant. It shouldn't take forever to fix a sidewalk. And we can help cool our streets by expanding our tree canopy with native trees. And that'll also give us cleaner air and more effective water management. So with the passage of Healthy Streets, we can show that it's important to invest in preventative measures instead of reactive measures. We always find money for reactive measures, but we need to find money for our people. And when a community is invested in, it will prosper. I look forward to making that a reality and earning your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. John Paul?
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to be here to answer these questions. So I'm a mental health professional. When I am conceptualizing the city of Los Angeles, I like to think about things through the lens of mental health, right? How do different things affect people's mental health? So when it comes to transportation, when it comes to our safety on our streets, when it comes to being stuck in traffic, one item after the next, right? There are substantial mental health impacts that occur as a result. So as a council person, every decision that I make, I am filtering it through, what does this do to people's mental health, right? I'm looking at the city of Los Angeles as its own living organism, essentially, right? That we have roads, we have arteries, we have all these things, and we need to look at holistic solutions. And in finding holistic solutions and focusing on the backbone of this city, which is the transportation, what we're going to be able to do is to address essentially many of the root causes of what leads to homelessness, to racial and economic injustices within our communities. It's a huge piece of the puzzle, right? Think about homelessness as a symptom, and it's a symptom of a larger disease. Within that disease, we have bad transportation. For an individual who's living on the bubble, if they use a car to get to work and their car breaks down and they don't have access to good transportation, that individual, because of the lack of our planning, because of systemic failures, that individual is more likely to fall into homelessness. And for that reason, we have to get serious. We have to build. We have to really keep in mind, we're talking about people's lives here. This isn't just about trying to become popular. Thank you.
Thank you. Manny.
Well, thank you, everyone. Streets for All. Thank you, fellow candidates, for those who show up. I appreciate it. It's good for democracy. It takes a lot right on a Wednesday with all the things we're juggling. And happy to say, can't wait to get out, campaign, and vote for whatever measure it is, but Healthy Streets LA. I think it's important. It's important for not just CD2, it's important for the whole city. And I share a lot of those values, everything that's been said here, the questions. I lead by example, and I want to be able to take that leadership and work with partners, trusted partners like you all, to get it done. And I'll be honored to earn your support and just be a thought leader, but also, be a learner. I don't know everything about transit development. I don't know everything about how we're going to electrify the grid and how we're going to create all these hubs that need to be built out and how we're going to do this in a thoughtful way that doesn't leave working families behind. But that's what you are here for, right? That's what we're here in democracy to talk through, to make sure we work it out. Because I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know. And I'm happy to say that. And I'm proud to say that. But we got to be able to work together to get it done. And there's so many pieces here that can be elegantly put together, but there's so many disjointed stakeholders and issues that for some reason we can't come to common ground. And that's where I think what we need to come together, right? And that's the job of the council member. That's a job that I will take seriously, to be able to bring people together who may not agree on a vision, but as long as it's serving the whole community. And again, that's what the community wants, and that's what's good for the environment. And recognizing there's huge disparities in CD2, right? 24% tree canopy. It's a number that I think is skewed because it takes in Toluca Lake, it takes in North Hollywood, Sun Valley, and other areas. And I know because Tree People, the organization I work for as a policy director, did the analysis for the city, and it's old. It's going on 4 years now. So I'd love to see the growth of the tree canopy, but that's just one piece amongst many where you see the disparities. And we talked about the division between the northern part of the district and the southern. And I would love to bring it together in a way that's cohesive and works for everybody. So thank you and have a good evening.
Well, thank you so much. I especially want to thank the candidates. I know this isn't always so easy with such specific questions. We really do appreciate it. We think it's so important at the campaign level, well before people get elected, to be having these conversations. So we really appreciate your time, your patience. Thank you to our audience for asking questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to more. We did the best we could. No matter who you vote for, please vote. We have an abysmal percentage of people that vote in Los Angeles. So please get out there and vote in March. Could not be easier. It's now vote by mail. And have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. Good night.